Picture this. A young immigrant in Queens, washing dishes at 14, rejected from Dunkin' Donuts because he wasn't qualified enough. Fast forward 30 years. He's worth hundreds of millions, but you've never heard his name. While tech bros chase IPOs and acquisitions, he cracked a different code entirely. The man who figured out how to get rich without getting lucky. His tweets broke the internet. His philosophy rewrote Silicon Valley. But what he discovered will change everything you think you know about wealth. This is Naval Ravikant, and his story isn't what you think. Naval Ravikant doesn't fit the Silicon Valley mold. No flashy exits splashed across TechCrunch. No magazine covers. No victory laps. He built his fortune through a method so simple it sounds like a scam. So obvious that most people dismiss it completely. But here's what's fascinating. Naval became wealthy by doing what everyone said was impossible. He got rich without working for anyone else, without venture capital, without even trying that hard. The secret? Something he calls specific knowledge. Most people think wealth comes from grinding, from working harder than everyone else, from sacrificing everything for success. Naval proved them wrong. He identified leverage before anyone else understood it. Not just financial leverage, but intellectual leverage, media leverage, code leverage. The kind that works while you sleep. While his peers were climbing corporate ladders, Naval was building systems. While they were chasing promotions, he was creating products that scaled infinitely. While they were networking at conferences, he was writing code that would run forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Naval turned down opportunities that would have made him famous, but not free. He walked away from deals worth hundreds of millions because they came with golden handcuffs. He rejected the traditional Silicon Valley playbook entirely. The moment he realized traditional success was a trap, changed everything. It happened during a board meeting in 2008. Naval was sitting across from venture capitalists who controlled his fate. They were dictating terms, telling him how to run his company, micromanaging every decision. He looked around that conference room and had an epiphany. These people weren't his partners. They were his bosses. And he traded his freedom for their money. That's when Naval discovered something profound. The real game wasn't about building companies that investors would love. It was about building systems that would set him free. He started studying the patterns. What made some people wealthy while others stayed trapped? Why did some entrepreneurs build empires while others built jobs for themselves? The answer wasn't what anyone expected. Naval realized that most business advice was backwards. Everyone talked about working harder, but the richest people he knew barely worked at all. Everyone preached about networking, but the wealthiest individuals were often antisocial. Everyone said you needed capital to make money, but the biggest fortunes came from ideas that required almost nothing. The pattern was clear. Wealth wasn't about effort. It was about leverage. But not the kind of leverage they teach in business school. Naval discovered 3 types of leverage that actually mattered: people, capital, and products with no marginal cost of replication. The third type was the game changer: software, media, code that runs forever, content that scales infinitely, products that work without you. This realization led Naval to a radical experiment. What if he could build wealth without employees, without offices, without the traditional infrastructure that trapped everyone else? What if he could create a business that was just him? The experiment worked, but not in the way anyone expected. Naval didn't become wealthy by building one successful company. He became wealthy by understanding the system itself, by identifying the hidden patterns that create lasting wealth. He turned angel investing into a science. While other investors relied on gut instinct and personal connections, Naval developed frameworks, principles, repeatable processes that could predict success. His early investments in Twitter, Uber, and dozens of other companies weren't lucky guesses. They were calculated bets based on a deeper understanding of how technology creates value. But the real secret wasn't his investing strategy. It was his philosophy. Naval realized that the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of happiness weren't opposing forces. They were the same thing. Both required the same skill: the ability to delay gratification and think in systems rather than goals. This insight would eventually make him more famous than any business success ever could. But it would also reveal something darker about the price of wisdom in Silicon Valley. But Naval's path to Silicon Valley wisdom started in a very different place. A place that taught him lessons no business school ever could. Born in Delhi, raised in Queens. The immigrant story nobody talks about. His mother brought him to America when he was 9 years old. Single mother, 2 kids, no money. They lived on food stamps and slept on floors. The American dream felt more like survival. While his classmates worried about homework, Naval worried about rent. While they planned for college, he planned for his next meal. The gap between his reality and everyone else's was impossible to ignore. At 14, he was washing dishes in restaurant kitchens, scrubbing pots until his hands bled, coming home exhausted, smelling like grease and disappointment. He applied for a job at Dunkin' Donuts, a minimum wage job serving coffee and donuts. They rejected him. Not qualified enough, they said, for Dunkin' Donuts. Think about that for a moment. The man who would eventually invest in companies worth billions couldn't get hired to work at a donut shop. His classmates were applying to colleges. Naval was applying to survive. But something interesting happened during those brutal years. While everyone else was following the prescribed path, school, college, career, Naval was learning something different. Something they don't teach in textbooks. He was learning the difference between being busy and being productive. The restaurant owners he worked for were always busy, always stressed, always working 16-hour days. But they weren't getting ahead. They were trapped in their own businesses, prisoners of their own success. Meanwhile, the suppliers who delivered food to the restaurant would show up for 30 minutes, drop off their goods, collect their payment, and leave. Same revenue, fraction of the effort. Naval started noticing patterns everywhere. The busiest people weren't the richest people. The hardest workers weren't the most successful. There was something else going on. The local library became his university, not because he was studious, but because it was free and warm. His mother would drop him off there after school because she couldn't afford childcare. So Naval read everything: business books, philosophy, science fiction. He consumed knowledge like it was food, because in many ways, it was. But here's what's fascinating. Naval wasn't just reading to learn. He was reading to understand, to find patterns, to decode the system that seemed to work for everyone except people like him. He noticed that most business books were written by people who had never been poor. They talked about taking risks, but they'd never risked missing a meal. They preached about following your passion, but they'd never had to choose between passion and survival. Their advice was useless to someone starting from zero. So Naval started developing his own theories, his own frameworks, based not on what sounded good, but on what actually worked for people with nothing. The first business idea came when he was 16. He'd noticed that his mother and her friends were always trying to send money back to family in India. The process was expensive, complicated, and slow. Naval thought, what if there was a better way? He spent months researching international money transfers, learning about exchange rates, banking regulations, wire transfer fees. He built a business plan, found potential customers, calculated the market size. The business failed spectacularly. Not because the idea was bad. Someone would eventually build this exact business and make billions. It failed because Naval was 16, had no capital, and no connections. But the failure taught him everything. It taught him that good ideas without execution are worthless. That market timing matters more than market size. That being right too early is the same as being wrong. Most importantly, it taught him that poverty wasn't just about lacking money. It was about lacking leverage, lacking the ability to turn ideas into reality. This realization would haunt him for years, but it would also drive him to discover something profound about how wealth actually works. The lesson wasn't that hard work doesn't matter. The lesson was that the wrong kind of hard work is worse than no work at all. Naval learned to distinguish between effort and impact, between motion and progress, between looking busy and creating value. These weren't lessons you could learn in a classroom. They required failure. They required desperation. They required starting from a place where every decision mattered. By the time Naval finally escaped Queens, he'd already learned the most important lesson of his life. The system wasn't designed for people like him. If he wanted to win, he'd have to build his own game entirely. Fast forward to 2010. Naval had escaped Queens, learned to code, and built his first successful startup. But he was about to create something that would change Silicon Valley forever. The idea seemed simple, almost boring. What if there was a platform where startups could find investors, and investors could find startups? A dating app for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. Naval called it AngelList. But here's what nobody understood at the time. AngelList wasn't just a platform, it was a weapon. A weapon aimed at the heart of the most exclusive club in the world, Sand Hill Road. For decades, venture capital had operated like a secret society. You needed connections to get connections. You needed money to make money. The gatekeepers controlled everything. If you weren't part of the network, you didn't exist. Naval had experienced this firsthand. Brilliant entrepreneurs with world-changing ideas couldn't get meetings. Meanwhile, mediocre founders with the right pedigree got millions in funding. The system was broken, and Naval was about to break it wide open. The VCs saw it coming, and they tried to kill it before it launched. The phone calls started immediately. Powerful investors who'd never spoken to Naval before suddenly wanted meetings. They offered partnerships. They offered to invest. They offered everything except what Naval actually wanted: to let him build what he was building. Behind the scenes, they were working to shut him down. They complained to regulators. They threatened legal action. They spread rumors that what Naval was doing was illegal, dangerous, irresponsible. The pressure was immense. Naval was going up against some of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley. People who could destroy his reputation with a phone call. But Naval had learned something in Queens that his enemies had never experienced: how to fight when you have nothing to lose. The regulatory battles were brutal. The SEC didn't understand what AngelList was trying to do. They saw it as a threat to their carefully constructed rules about who could invest in what. For months, it looked like the whole project would collapse. The legal fees were crushing. The uncertainty was paralyzing. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles, new reasons to quit. Most entrepreneurs would have given up. Most would have taken the safe path, compromised with the establishment, found a way to work within the system. Naval chose war. He realized that the resistance wasn't a bug in his plan. It was proof that he was on to something massive. The VCs weren't trying to stop AngelList because it was a bad idea. They were trying to stop it because it was a great idea that threatened their monopoly. So Naval did something unexpected. Instead of backing down, he doubled down. Instead of hiding from the controversy, he embraced it. He turned rejection into the biggest disruption in finance. The breakthrough came when Naval realized he didn't need to fight the regulations. He needed to change them. Working with lawyers and lobbyists, he helped craft new rules that would allow ordinary people to invest in startups. The Jobs Act of 2012 was partly inspired by what Naval was trying to build with AngelList. Suddenly, the platform that VCs had tried to kill became legal. More than legal, it became the future. The moment Sand Hill Road realized they'd been outplayed was priceless. These masters of the universe, these kingmakers who decided which companies lived and died, suddenly found themselves competing with teachers, doctors, and small business owners. The exclusivity was gone. The gatekeeping was over. Anyone with money could become an angel investor. But Naval's real genius wasn't in democratizing access. It was in understanding what would happen next. When you remove artificial barriers, talent finds a way. Entrepreneurs who'd been locked out of the system suddenly had access to capital. Investors who'd been ignored by traditional VCs could now deploy their money directly. The results were staggering. AngelList didn't just connect entrepreneurs and investors. It created an entirely new ecosystem. Syndicates allowed small investors to pool their money and back deals they never could have accessed alone. Rolling funds let successful angels raise money like VCs without the bureaucracy. Naval was making millionaires out of ordinary people while VCs watched helplessly. The platform processed billions in investments. It funded thousands of companies. It created hundreds of success stories. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was philosophical. Naval had proven that the old gatekeepers weren't necessary, that innovation didn't need permission, that the best ideas could come from anywhere, funded by anyone. He'd taken the most elitist industry in the world and turned it into a meritocracy. The revolution was complete, and Naval was just getting started. But success has a way of revealing uncomfortable truths, and Naval was about to discover something that would change everything he thought he knew about winning. By 2017, AngelList was processing billions in investments. Naval's portfolio was exploding in value. Twitter, Uber, dozens of unicorns. On paper, he was crushing it. But something was wrong. He was miserable. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years helping other people get rich, and now that he was rich himself, he felt emptier than ever. The turning point came during a board meeting that should have been a celebration. One of his portfolio companies had just closed a massive funding round. Everyone was congratulating each other, talking about valuations and exit strategies. Naval sat there watching these successful people compete over who had the bigger win, the better deal, the more impressive portfolio. And he realized he was looking at his future self. Rich, accomplished, completely hollow. That night, Naval did something he'd never done before. He sat down and wrote. Not code, not investment memos, just thoughts. Raw, unfiltered thoughts about what he was actually trying to accomplish with his life. The result was a tweet storm that would break the internet. How to get rich without getting lucky. 38 tweets that distilled everything Naval had learned about wealth creation into timeless principles. No fluff, no motivation, just pure, concentrated wisdom. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The thread went viral instantly. Millions of views, thousands of retweets. People were screenshotting it, printing it, turning it into courses and books. But here's what most people missed. Naval wasn't trying to teach people how to get rich. He was trying to figure out why being rich hadn't made him happy. The tweet storm was Naval's attempt to understand his own journey, to identify the principles that actually mattered versus the ones that just sounded good. Writing it forced him to confront an uncomfortable reality. He'd been playing the wrong game entirely. He'd optimized for wealth creation when what he actually wanted was freedom. He'd chased external validation when what he needed was internal peace. He'd built systems to make money when what he should have built were systems to make meaning. This realization triggered what Naval would later call his philosophy shift. He stopped chasing traditional success metrics. No more tracking portfolio performance. No more comparing himself to other investors. No more defining his worth by his net worth. Instead, he started asking different questions. What would make him genuinely happy? What kind of life did he actually want to live? What would he do if money wasn't a factor? The answers surprised him. Naval discovered that his happiest moments weren't closing deals or seeing investments pay off. They were quiet moments of understanding, reading a great book, having a profound conversation, solving an interesting problem. He realized that what he'd been calling success was actually a sophisticated form of slavery. He'd built golden handcuffs and locked himself inside them. The meditation practice started as an experiment. Naval had read about it, heard successful people talk about it, but never took it seriously. It seemed too simple, too passive. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The first sessions were torture. His mind raced constantly. Thoughts about deals, investments, problems to solve. He couldn't sit still for 5 minutes without getting anxious. But Naval approached meditation the same way he approached everything else, systematically. He studied different techniques, experimented with various approaches, tracked what worked and what didn't. Slowly, something shifted. The constant mental chatter began to quiet. The endless loop of worry and planning started to fade. For the first time in years, Naval experienced something he'd forgotten existed: peace. Not the temporary peace of solving a problem or closing a deal, deep, lasting peace that didn't depend on external circumstances. This led to his most controversial claim: happiness is a learnable skill. Not happiness as in constant pleasure or excitement. Happiness as in a baseline state of contentment, the absence of suffering, the ability to be okay with what is, rather than constantly needing what isn't. The idea scandalized Silicon Valley. These were people who'd built their entire identities around struggle, around never being satisfied, around always wanting more. Naval was suggesting they'd been doing it wrong, that the very drive that made them successful was also making them miserable. The pushback was immediate. Other investors called him soft. Entrepreneurs questioned his commitment. The hustle culture crowd dismissed him as a rich guy who'd lost his edge. But Naval had discovered something more valuable than any investment return: the difference between being rich and being free. The day he realized he'd already won the game changed everything. It started with a simple realization that would make Naval richer than he ever imagined. While other investors were chasing the next hot deal, Naval was playing a completely different game. He wasn't trying to pick winners. He was trying to understand the system that creates winners. His early investments in Twitter, Uber, and dozens of other companies weren't random bets. They were the result of a selection criteria that seemed random but wasn't. Naval had cracked the code on compound returns. Most investors think about returns linearly. Put in $1, get back $2, celebrate the 100% return. Naval thought exponentially. He was looking for investments that could return 100x or 1000x over decades. The difference is staggering. A 100% return doubles your money. A 1000% return creates generational wealth. But finding these outliers required a completely different approach. Naval realized that the biggest returns came from investments that seemed impossible at the time. Twitter in 2009 looked like a toy. People sharing random thoughts in 140 characters? Who would pay for that? Uber in 2010 seemed illegal. Getting into strangers' cars? Regulators would shut it down immediately. These companies violated conventional wisdom. They broke established rules. They created markets that didn't exist. That's exactly why Naval invested in them. He developed a simple framework. Bet on people, not business plans. While other investors analyzed spreadsheets and market projections, Naval studied founders, their backgrounds, their motivations, their ability to adapt when everything went wrong. Because everything always goes wrong. The business plan never survives contact with reality. The market is never what you expect. The competition is always fiercer than predicted. But great founders find a way. They pivot without losing momentum. They solve problems that weren't in the original plan. They build something better than what they initially imagined. Naval's portfolio became a masterclass in founder psychology. He backed immigrants who understood hunger, engineers who solved their own problems, contrarians who ignored conventional wisdom. The pattern was clear. The best investments came from people who had no choice but to succeed. This approach created something unprecedented: automatic wealth generation. Naval's early investments began compounding at rates that defied logic. Twitter went from worthless to worth billions. Uber transformed transportation globally. Company after company in his portfolio became household names. But here's what made Naval different from other successful investors. He understood that the real compound effect wasn't just financial. Each successful investment taught him something new, about markets, about timing, about human nature. This knowledge compounded too, making his next investments even better. The network effects were extraordinary. Successful founders introduced him to other promising entrepreneurs. Portfolio companies hired each other's employees. Synergies emerged that no one could have planned. Naval had built more than an investment portfolio. He'd built an ecosystem. The moment his portfolio became worth more than most public companies was surreal. Naval looked at his net worth and realized he'd accidentally created a fortune that rivaled major corporations. But unlike those corporations, his wealth required almost no maintenance. No employees to manage, no offices to rent, no operations to oversee. His investments worked while he slept. They grew while he meditated. They compounded while he read philosophy books. This was the ultimate expression of leverage. Naval had created a machine that generated wealth automatically, freeing him to focus on what actually mattered. The irony wasn't lost on him. By caring less about money, he'd made more money than when money was his obsession. The compound effect had worked its magic, not just on his investments, but on his entire approach to life. He'd learned that the best returns come from playing infinite games. Games where the goal isn't to win, but to keep playing. Games that get better the longer you play them. Naval's wealth wasn't just compounding financially. It was compounding philosophically, creating freedom that money alone could never buy. But Naval's success was doing something dangerous. It was threatening the entire foundation of traditional business education. Everything they taught in MBA programs was backwards. Work your way up the corporate ladder? Naval proved you could skip the ladder entirely. Raise venture capital to scale? He showed how to build wealth without giving up equity. Network your way to success? Naval became successful by ignoring most networking events. The productize yourself philosophy was the final nail in the coffin. Instead of competing in existing markets, Naval taught people to create markets around themselves, to become so uniquely valuable that competition became irrelevant. Think about it. There's only one Joe Rogan, only one Elon Musk, only one Naval Ravikant. You can't replace them because they've built businesses around their specific combination of knowledge, personality, and perspective. This was revolutionary. Business schools taught standardization. Naval taught differentiation. They preached best practices. He preached finding your own path. The traditional model required armies of employees, expensive offices, and massive overhead. Naval's model required none of that. How do you build wealth without employees? You build systems that scale without human intervention. Software that runs automatically. Content that spreads virally. Products that sell themselves. How do you succeed without offices? You work from anywhere, hire the best talent globally, and eliminate the friction of physical location. You bootstrap with revenue, maintain control of your destiny, and avoid the golden handcuffs that trap most entrepreneurs. Naval identified 4 types of leverage that most people never discover. Labor leverage, other people working for you. This is what most businesses rely on, but it's also the most fragile. People quit, get sick, demand raises, and create management overhead. Capital leverage, using other people's money. Powerful, but it comes with strings attached. Investors want control, returns, and exit strategies that might not align with your vision. Code leverage, software that works without you. This is where the magic happens. Write code once, it runs forever. Build a system once, it scales infinitely. Media leverage, content that spreads your ideas. Podcasts, books, videos, tweets, your thoughts working for you while you sleep. The last 2 types cost almost nothing to create, but can generate unlimited returns. That's why Naval focused obsessively on building products with zero marginal cost. But here's where Naval's approach gets controversial. He argued that working harder is the enemy of getting richer. This flies in the face of everything we're taught about success. Hustle culture, grinding, outworking the competition. Naval's insight was deeper. Hard work in the wrong direction is worse than no work at all. Most people confuse motion with progress, effort with impact. The richest people Naval knew worked the least. Not because they were lazy, but because they'd built systems that worked without them. This led to his most radical principle, the automation mindset. Instead of asking, "How can I work harder?" Naval asked, "How can I work never?" Not because work is bad, but because the best work creates systems that eliminate the need for future work. Write software once, it runs forever. Create content once, it generates value indefinitely. Build a business once, it operates automatically. This mindset shift separates entrepreneurs from employees. Employees trade time for money. Entrepreneurs build assets that generate money without trading time. Naval had discovered the ultimate cheat code: how to make money while you sleep. But implementing these principles required something most people weren't willing to do. It required saying no to almost everything. It required disappointing people who expected him to play by the old rules. It required becoming comfortable with being misunderstood. The automation mindset that creates freedom was about to face its ultimate test. Because Naval was about to do something that would shock Silicon Valley. He was going to disappear. By 2018, something strange was happening. Naval Ravikant was becoming more famous for his philosophy than his investments. The man who'd revolutionized startup funding was quietly stepping away from the game he'd mastered. Naval's gradual withdrawal from the traditional startup world wasn't retirement. It was evolution. He'd built AngelList into a machine that operated without him. The platform processed billions in investments automatically. Syndicates ran themselves. Rolling funds functioned independently. Naval had achieved the ultimate goal of any entrepreneur. He'd made himself unnecessary. But this wasn't about stepping back from work. This was about stepping into a different kind of work entirely. While other investors were still chasing deals, Naval was building something more valuable than any portfolio, systems that would outlive him. He started documenting everything, the principles behind his success, the frameworks he'd developed, the mental models that guided his decisions. This wasn't about ego or legacy. This was about multiplication. Naval realized that his ideas could have more impact than his capital ever could. One person with the right principles could create more wealth than 100 people with the wrong approach. The podcast strategy emerged from this insight. Instead of taking meetings with entrepreneurs, Naval started recording conversations about the deeper principles of wealth creation. Instead of advising individual companies, he shared frameworks that could help thousands of entrepreneurs simultaneously. Each podcast episode was an investment in human capital. Teaching someone to think correctly about business was more valuable than giving them money to think incorrectly. The response was unprecedented. Naval's podcast episodes were downloaded millions of times. His ideas spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire. Entrepreneurs started building companies based on his principles rather than traditional venture capital wisdom. But here's what made Naval's exit strategy brilliant. He was creating more value by doing less work. The traditional investor model required constant activity, sourcing deals, conducting due diligence, managing portfolios. It was a job that consumed your entire life. Naval's model required almost no ongoing effort. His ideas worked for him. His principles spread themselves. His influence multiplied automatically. Why did he give away his best knowledge for free? This was the question that puzzled everyone in Silicon Valley. Naval had discovered secrets that could make people incredibly wealthy. Instead of charging for this knowledge, he was broadcasting it to anyone who would listen. The answer reveals Naval's deepest insight about wealth creation. Hoarding knowledge creates artificial scarcity. Sharing knowledge creates abundance. And abundance is where the real opportunities hide. When Naval taught people his principles, he was creating an ecosystem of entrepreneurs who understood how wealth actually works. These entrepreneurs built better companies. They made smarter decisions. They created more value for society. And when they succeeded, they often came back to Naval, not as an investor, but as a collaborator, someone who understood their journey because he taught them the map. Naval was creating a legacy beyond money. He was programming the next generation of entrepreneurs with principles that would compound for decades. The ultimate goal wasn't wealth, it wasn't fame, it wasn't even impact. The ultimate goal was complete autonomy. Naval wanted the freedom to think about whatever interested him, to work on problems that mattered to him, to live according to his own schedule and priorities. By stepping away from the traditional game, he'd gained something more valuable than any investment return: the ability to define success on his own terms. The exit strategy was complete. Naval had escaped the matrix he'd helped create. The simple truth was hiding in plain sight all along. It was never about the money. It was about the freedom. Naval cracked the code by refusing to play the game everyone else was playing. While they chased valuations, he built systems. While they sought approval, he sought autonomy. While they optimized for wealth, he optimized for wisdom. The real secret wasn't complex. Specific knowledge plus leverage equals inevitable wealth. Find what you're uniquely good at. Apply infinite leverage through code, media, or capital. Give it time to compound. Everything else is just noise. Want to see how deep this goes? The next video reveals the dark side of Silicon Valley's golden boy. Subscribe for the stories they don't want you to know.